Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to give you a shortcut into, well, probably the most consequential geopolitical contest of our lifetime, the rivalry between the United States and China.
It really is.
And this isn't just about the latest tariff news, This is a fundamental structural change. We're unpacking the collision course that was set in motion way back when China started its reform and opening up in 1978.
And that opening up was, incredibly successful. China's economy has just surged. It's on track to become the world's largest by 2030.
Right.
And the core tension we see today is that the U.S., well, it no longer sees this as just some benign competition. It's now framed as a systemic security threat.
A threat, exactly.
And that perception drives this massive, multifaceted struggle. We're talking economic, political, and ideological. It's all led to what many analysts are now calling a comprehensive strategy of containment. Some even say encirclement.
And China has definitely shifted its posture, which has accelerated that whole perception. Historically, Chinese leaders liked that low-profile approach, right? The whole peaceful rise idea.
Keep your head down.
Exactly, trying not to set off alarm bells in Washington. But that quiet strategy seems to have been, well, decisively abandoned since about 2012. You just look at projects like Made in China 2025 or the Belt and Road Initiative. It's so clear China's pursuing a much more assertive path now.
A much more global strategic trajectory, no question.
Okay, so let's unpack the ideological part of this first, because that's where you find this sense of, betrayal from the U.S. perspective. For decades, the big U.S. assumption, especially after China joined the WTO in 2001, was pretty simple.
Yeah, the prevailing wisdom was
That if you just expose them to free markets, to global trade, China would inevitably have to democratize, it would liberalize its political system. We now know that was a profound miscalculation. Why did that turn out to be such an illusion?
It was an illusion because it just completely underestimated the resilience and, frankly, the adaptability of the Chinese Communist Party. China basically engineered this unique state-guided capitalist model.
So they took the economic benefits without the political strings.
Precisely. They achieved this unprecedented global economic power by embracing trade and tech, but then they used that wealth and power to strengthen internal political control, not loosen it. And this created a huge crisis of confidence in the U.S. about the whole idea of liberal hegemony itself.
I've heard this point before.
Yeah, you have scholars like John Mearsheimer arguing that this whole U.S. project of spreading democracy through economics, he called it the Great Delusion, was just ignoring the raw power dynamics that are always at play when a new great power comes along.
So if the ideological bet completely failed, we have to look at how the physical contest is being framed. And that brings us to this huge geographical shift. I'm talking about the move away from the Asia-Pacific to this new strategic term, the Indo-Pacific.
Right.
This change, Japan really pioneered it, then the U.S. adopted it. It's clearly more than just updating a map. What's the core game plan behind that relabeling?
It's a very deliberate, strategic attempt to securitize the entire region against China's expansion. By linking the Pacific and Indian Oceans, the U.S. and its allies can roll out a single, comprehensive strategy across a much, much broader area.
And how does that work in practice?
Well, it really relies on two critical containment mechanisms. The first is what they call FOIP, the Free and Open Indo-Pacific Strategy. This is all about freedom of navigation, promoting infrastructure investments that are positioned as an alternative to China's BRI, and really just maintaining the U.S.-led order.
And the second part focuses more on alliances, specifically with the big democracies in the region.
Exactly. The second mechanism is the revitalization of the QAD, the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. That links the U.S., Japan, India, and Australia. This alliance is pretty explicitly designed to be a counterweight to China's influence and its territorial claims, especially in the South China Sea.
And we've seen them in action.
We have. We saw a powerful demonstration during the Malabar 2020 naval exercise. It was the first time all four QAID members were operating together like that in the Bay of Bengal. It sent a very clear signal of strategic unity.
And of course, concepts and alliances, they're only as good as the hard power backing them up. We saw the U.S. Pacific Command, PACOM, get formally renamed to Indo-PACOM. So when we talk about projecting power toward Asia, what are the most critical U.S. assets and bases that are underpinning all this?
The ability to project that power is really centered on three key locations. You've got San Diego, which is the main hub for the Indo-Pacific fleet. It's the logistical backbone.
Okay.
Then you have Hawaii, which is Indo-PACOM headquarters, a massive operational hub supporting over 80,000 troops. But you could argue the most strategically important location, the real forward presence, is Guam.
Guam. I've heard it called the tip of the spear. Why is it so crucial?
It's geography. It's just vital. It's far enough from the Asian mainland to be relatively secure, but it's close enough to flashpoints like Taiwan and the South China Sea to allow for a really rapid response.
So it's the launch pad.
It's the launch pad. It hosts Andersen Air Force Base, which can deploy B-2 stealth bombers, and a major naval base with nuclear-powered attack submarines. If the U.S. needs to assert its presence in the Western Pacific, the assets in Guam are the first to move.
Okay, so that's the U.S. external strategy.
But while the U.S. is focusing on this external containment, China's main response has been, well, proactive. It's focused on internal resilience and, critically, technological self-sufficiency. This is where we have to talk about Made in China 2025.
The big industrial plan.
The centerpiece of their policy. Launched in 2015, it was all about transforming China from, a place that makes cheap stuff into a global leader in high-tech manufacturing.
Self-sufficiency. So what were the actual metrics they were aiming for? Was this like a realistic plan or just aspirational?
Oh, it was incredibly ambitious. The main goal was technological sovereignty. They set a target for the Chinese domestic content of core materials to hit 70% by 2025.
70%. Wow.
And that was across 10 key sectors. We're talking information technology, AI, IoT robotics, EVs, aerospace, and the big one, semiconductors.
And the U.S. response to this was basically to treat it as an economic declaration of war. They hit them with massive tariffs, export controls, all designed to choke the program off from Western tech. But from what I'm reading, it's been surprisingly successful despite all that.
It's been remarkably effective. I mean, recent reports suggest China has achieved something like 86% of its goals in the plan. They've become the outright global leader in several critical future technologies.
Like what?
High-speed rail, for one, solar panels, and the entire EV and lithium battery supply chain. They blew past their own internal targets for EV production, hitting over 3 million a year by 2023.
But where does the dependency on the West still exist? Because that seems to be the focus of this ongoing chip war.
The dependency remains in the most complex, the absolute cutting-edge segments.
Right.
Advanced aeronautics and, like you said, leading-edge semiconductors. The U.S. strategy is surgically targeted that exact vulnerability.
How so?
When we talk about advanced chips, the dependency is on Western companies for the incredibly specialized equipment, especially for something called advanced photolithography. That's the high-tech process you need to print the unbelievably tiny circuits for the chips that power advanced AI and modern military tech. And that barrier is still huge.
And the U.S. is just leaning on that pressure point, restricting access to even more tools, going after firms like Huawei and SMIC. So how is China fighting back?
They're responding with these dual internal mandates. I mean, of course, they're investing hundreds of billions in their own domestic chip development, but they're also forcing domestic adoption.
Creating their own market.
Exactly. There's a major directive now that public data centers across the country have to source at least 50% of their chips domestically. It's a strategic move to build up their own industry and reduce their vulnerability, even if their current chips aren't quite at the same performance level as, say, NVIDIA's best.
And to sort of reinforce this whole resilience idea, China also rolled out the dual circulation strategy, or DCS, around 2020. This sounds like a direct attempt to bulletproof their economy.
That is exactly what it is. The DCS model prioritizes the internal market domestic circulation as the main engine for growth. It doesn't mean they're abandoning exports, but it fundamentally reduces their reliance on them. It minimizes their vulnerability to things like trade wars and supply chain disruptions. It's a survival mechanism.
So if China's strategy is about self-reliance, we have to connect that to U.S. economic policy. The America First idea leaned heavily on protectionist measures like tariffs to reduce the trade deficit. But that carries its own domestic risks, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And this is where the containment strategy gets really complicated for the American public. Economists point out that tariffs, some of them up to 50%, they aren't actually paid by China. They're paid by U.S. importers.
And those costs get passed to consumers.
Directly to American consumers. The data suggests this risks higher inflation, even recessionary pressure. Some estimates put the cumulative cost of these tariffs at something like $3,800 per U.S. household. That's a very steep and kind of hidden price tag for this policy.
Okay, so let's shift focus to the critical hinge point in all of this. Southeast Asia. the region governed by the 10 nations of ASEAN. With over 650 million people sitting on choke points like the Malacca Strait, it's just indispensable.
ASEAN nations are caught in an intense strategic squeeze. On one side, you have the massive China pull. China's been their largest trade partner for 15 years straight. We're talking over $911 billion in trade in 2023. The geography is just inescapable.
And the U.S. is trying to pull in the other direction.
Yes, that's the U.S. counterpull. The U.S. tries to stay relevant mainly as the region's biggest foreign investor. They use cooperation agreements and joint military exercises to reinforce their security position, especially around freedom of navigation.
The fascinating part to me is ASEAN's response to being in this pressure cooker. They've adopted what's called a balance policy. They are trying desperately to avoid choosing a side.
That neutrality is their existential strategy. Their whole focus is on internal unity. They've even fostered their own ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific.
What's the key difference there?
The critical nuance is that their outlook is defined as open and inclusive, which is code for saying it is designed not to exclude China. They want the economic benefits from both powers without becoming, collateral damage in their rivalry.
But that's got to be incredibly hard to maintain when economics and tech are now security issues.
The challenges are immense. First, there's just the raw economic vulnerability. Relying so heavily on China's economy means any fluctuation in China, or if Beijing decides to use economics as a weapon, it creates immediate risk.
And the tech side?
Then there's the intense technological coercion. Every ASEAN nation has to pick a side in the tech war. Do you listen to U.S. warnings about Huawei's security risks, or do you take the undeniable cost and performance benefits of their 5G? That's not just a choice about phones. It's a strategic choice about your entire digital future and your foreign policy.
And finally, a lot of these countries have internal political issues that complicate things with Washington.
Exactly. Domestic issues like the democratic reversal in Myanmar or human rights concerns in the Philippines create friction with the U.S., which often ties its cooperation to democratic values. And Beijing is always happy to exploit that friction.
So if we step back from all this, it really feels systemic.
It is. The whole struggle makes you think of the classical theories of hegemonic conflict. Scholars like Robert Gilpin talked about how when a rising state's power grows, it creates instability and clashes with the dominant power. It's perfectly captured by what Graham Allison famously called Thucydides' trap.
Right, the idea that the rise of a new power instills fear in the established one, and war often becomes the outcome.
Correct. Allison looked at 16 of these cases over the last 500 years. The really sobering statistic is that in 12 of those 16 cases, conflict broke out. This systemic tension, between an immovable America and a rapidly approaching China is playing out right now through tech, trade, and strategic maneuvering around flashpoints like Taiwan.
So we're not in a hot war, but we are deep inside a long, systemic geopolitical struggle fought on every possible front. The transition is happening.
That transition is the new global reality.
Then let me leave you with this final provocative thought to consider. The context for this struggle is totally unique in history. We're watching a potential hegemonic transition unfold entirely within a high-tech information age. So if the primary weapons are semiconductors, data infrastructure, and control over supply chains rather than just ships and armies, what will the new definitions of victory or defeat even look like in this digitally defined future?